Winter lay thick over Frostwell, the kind of winter that muted footsteps and swallowed voices whole. Marshal Rowan Hale moved through the pale morning haze with a steady gait that did not match the tremor inside him. Snow clung to his coat like tired memories, heavy and refusing to melt. In his arms rested Ash's partner, his shadow, his last unbroken bond in a life that had already frayed at too many seams. The dog's fur, once bristling with alert strength, now felt thin beneath Rowan's gloves, each breath shallow, each twitch painful to witness. The world around them was quiet in the way grief is quiet, wide, cold, waiting. Rowan's boots sank into the snow as he approached the old wooden clinic at the edge of town, the lantern above the door flickering like it struggled to remain part of the living world. He shifted Ash gently and whispered, "Easy, boy. I'm right here." The dog's ear gave the faintest twitch in response, a small grace that pierced deeper than Rowan expected. A whisper of movement caught his attention. Little Elsie Wren stood on the porch of Tessa Breyer's worn house next door, her silhouette framed by drifting snowflakes. Her coat was too big, sleeves swallowing half her hands. Her brown hair curled in the cold wind, teasing strands across her small face. When she saw Ash, her eyes widened, not with the kind of fear adults carried, but with a sorrow that belonged to someone who understood loss far too well. She hurried down the steps, boots knocking against the wood in an offbeat rhythm. Marshal Rowan. Is Ash? Is Hay? Her voice thinned where words failed. She pressed a palm to her chest, like steadying herself against the thought. Rowan tried to form an answer, but the grief lodged in his throat refused to move. Instead, he knelt so Elsie could see Ash's face. The dog opened one eye, soft and weary, and managed a weak brush of his nose against her mitten. Elsie dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around his neck with a tenderness that Rowan felt in the center of his ribs. Ash's breathing fluttered, and for a moment Rowan thought the dog might not endure even this much love. Tessa Breyer emerged behind Elsie, hugging her shawl tight. Her expression held the same heaviness that had settled across Frostwell ever since the pursuit last night. Rumors had already begun winding through the town like smoke through dry rafters. Some said Rowan had been reckless. Others whispered he had hesitated at the wrong moment. None of them knew the truth, that Ash had shoved Rowan aside before Rowan even had time to process the danger. Taking the bullet that should have ended Rowan's life. "Take him inside," Tessa murmured, voice gentle but urgent. "Dr. Lark will know what to do." Rowan nodded, rising with slow, careful movements. Elsie hesitated before standing, her mitten brushing lightly over Ash's head one more time, as if transferring something fragile and hopeful into his fur. Rowan felt her gaze follow him until he stepped into the clinic, where the smell of cedar and antiseptic met him like a strange mixture of comfort and dread. The warmth hit him first. The quiet hit him second. Everything inside Dr. Moran Lark's clinic seemed carved from winter's patient soft light, pale wood, and a hush that suggested every breath mattered. Marin emerged from the back room, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She moved like silence made human, her presence steadying, but never intrusive. When she saw Ash in Rowan's arms, her expression shifted instantly into something solemn yet determined. "Lay him here," she whispered, guiding Rowan to a padded table. Her hands hovered over Ash without touching at first, reading the tremors in his muscles. "Tell me everything." Rowan described the pursuit, the gunfire, the moment Ash lunged. Marin listened without interrupting, her eyes focused entirely on the dog. While Rowan spoke, the memory of last night replayed with unwelcome clarity, the flash of the muzzle, impact. Rowan falling to his knees as Ash collapsed beside him. He remembered calling the dog's name into the darkness, begging him to hold on. He remembered the dreadful silence when Ash didn't answer. Marin pressed gently around the wound, her voice low. "He's lost more blood than I hoped," she murmured. "And he's slipping faster than he should." She paused, meeting Rowan's eyes. "We may be running out of time." Those words, spoken with such soft regret, made Rowan's breath falter. He reached out to rest a hand on Ash's side. The dog's ribs rose and fell like a fragile tide. Exhaustion washed over Rowan's features, the kind born not from lack of sleep but from an ache that seeped into the bones. "He deserves peace," he murmured. If there's no way to save him, don't let him suffer. Marin nodded slowly, though her eyes flickered with something unspoken hesitation perhaps, or a hope she refused to voice. She stepped away briefly, preparing what she believed might be the final injection. Rowan stayed by Ash, leaning down so their foreheads nearly touched. He whispered apologies, one after another, each one unraveling a piece of the guilt he had carried since last night. The door creaked softly. Rowan turned to see Elsie slipping inside, breath misting the air like tiny ghosts. She clutched her mittens in tight fists, trying to keep her chin from trembling. "Please," she whispered, "can I say goodbye?" Rowan opened his mouth to tell her no, that this was not a moment a child should witness. But something about the steadiness in her eyes, the honest hurt, made him step aside. She approached the table with the wary reverence of someone approaching an altar. Marin paused mid-motion. Lowering the syringe slightly, Elsie placed both her small hands on Ash's muzzle, her thumbs brushing his fur like a lullaby. The dog's breathing stuttered, and then impossibly he pushed his head into her palms with a faint whine. A spark seemed to ripple through him, small but unmistakable. His paws twitched, not in pain but in effort. His heartbeat, once slow and fading, quickened beneath Rowan's touch. Marin froze, her brow furrowing. She moved closer, stethoscope already in hand, listening with sharp, focused intensity. Rowan watched her expression shift from confusion to alertness. "What is it?" he whispered. Marin raised her head slowly, eyes widening just enough to let the truth slip through. "Rowan, this isn't what it looked like a moment ago." She pressed her hand against Ash's chest again, feeling the rhythm strengthen. "He's stabilizing. Not completely, but something changed. Suddenly and sharply." Elsie looked up at Rowan, cheeks wet but hopeful. "He's not ready," she murmured, voice barely more than a breath. "I can feel it." Marin set the syringe aside, the decision firm in her posture. "I'm not putting him down," she said quietly. "Not now. Not when he's fighting like this." Rowan felt the room tilt, not from dizziness, but from disbelief that carried the weight of relief. He placed his hand over Ash's side again, feeling the life still pulsing there. Tension left his shoulders one frostbitten inch at a time. Marin exhaled slowly, gathering equipment with renewed urgency. "I need to run more tests," she said, already moving. "We may have a chance. A small one, but real." Rowan looked at Elsie, who stood with her hands still resting on Ash's muzzle, as if she were the one anchoring him to the world. Snow continued falling outside, soft and endless. But inside the clinic, the air shifted lighter, warmer, carrying a fragile promise. For the first time since the night Ash was shot, Rowan felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but the shape of it forming. And though he didn't know how the hours ahead would unfold, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. This moment was not an ending. It was the first breath of something still unfinished. Dawn crept slowly into Frostwell, its pale light pooling through the frost-trimmed windows of Dr. Moran Lark's clinic. The night had been long quiet in some places, trembling in others. Rowan Hale had not moved far from Ash's side. His posture was rigid, yet something gentler had settled around him, as though the act of keeping vigil had stripped away a layer of the heaviness he'd worn for months. Ash lay breathing in slow, uneven waves, fragile, yes, but undeniably present in a way he had not been hours earlier. Marin entered from the back room carrying a fresh set of bandages, her steps quiet, her expression alert. She had slept only in brief, stolen moments, but her eyes held a steady light. Rowan watched her cross the room, recognizing something familiar in her exhausted determination. She checked Ash's wound with meticulous care, her fingertips moving as though memorizing every change, every twitch, every sign that life was still tethered to him. "He's stabilizing," she murmured. "More than I expected." She glanced at Rowan, and the corners of her mouth softened. "Whatever happened last night didn't take him from us. Not yet." Rowan wanted to respond, but his voice felt caught halfway between disbelief and gratitude. Instead, he brushed his hand gently over Ash's ear. The dog's tail moved barely, but enough. A tiny thump that sounded like hope trying to beat its way into the room. The door creaked softly. Elsie Wren stepped inside, her boots leaving a trail of melted snow. She carried a mug between her hands, offering it to Rowan with the small, earnest seriousness that children possess when they don't know how else to help. "Tessa said it might warm you up," she whispered. Rowan accepted it with a nod that felt more like a bow. "Thank you, Elsie." He waited a moment before adding, "He's holding on." For now, her eyes brightened with careful joy, like she feared too much happiness might break the spell. She edged toward Ash, stopping only when Rowan gave a faint nod of permission. Standing beside him, she reached out and rested her hand on the dog's paw. Ash shifted slightly, responding to her presence with a soft exhale that caused Marin to look up sharply. "He reacts to her every time," Marin said. "Heartbeat, breathing, muscle tension, every sign sharpens when she's near. I don't have a medical name for that, but it matters." Rowan watched the two of them, child and dog, held together by something invisible, something even science seemed reluctant to explain. "He's always had a sense for people," Rowan murmured. "But with her, it's different." Marin nodded as she wrapped a fresh bandage around the wound. "Sometimes an animal chooses their person without hesitation." Her voice lowered, carrying a warmth that lingered, even when humans don't understand why. Before Rowan could reply, the door swung open again, this time with a rush of cold air and urgency. Deputy Jude Caro entered, snow clinging to his shoulders. His face held the rough exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept and didn't think he deserved to. The moment he saw Rowan, guilt shadowed his eyes. "I had to check on him," Jude said, voice raw. "I keep thinking if I'd been faster or sharper." Rowan lifted a hand, stopping the words before they frayed further. "There's no blame left to carry, Jude. He saved me because that's who he is. You did what you could." Jude looked as though the forgiveness hurt almost as much as the guilt. He walked closer to Ash, kneeling beside Elsie. When Ash lifted his chin a fraction toward Jude, the deputy's eyes glistened. "Still fighting?" he whispered. "Good boy." Marin handed Rowan a cloth warmed by the clinic's small stove. "Hold this to his side. It'll ease the tremors." Their fingers brushed lightly, unintentionally, but with a softness that lingered longer than the contact itself. Rowan didn't comment, though something inside him softened. Aware of the unspoken care in the gesture, hours passed in a rhythm of small movements, Marin adjusting equipment, Rowan steadying Ash's breathing with the warm cloth, Elsie humming softly under her breath as though offering a lullaby to the room. Jude remained nearby, quieter than Rowan had ever seen him. By late afternoon, the storm outside had grown into a curtain of falling white. The town would be blanketed soon, leaving roads impassable. Inside, however, the clinic felt like a fragile sanctuary suspended between fear and something better. Then it happened. So quietly at first that Rowan wasn't sure he had seen it. Ash's hind leg twitched, not the small involuntary flicker of earlier, but something deliberate. His head lifted by a fraction more. His breathing steadied into a firmer rhythm. Marin caught the change instantly. "Rowan," she whispered, voice tight with cautious hope. "Look." Ash blinked fully, clearing the blur from his gaze. He tried to push himself upward but failed, muscles still too weak. Still, the attempt was unmistakable. Elsie gasped softly and leaned closer, her small hand brushing the side of his muzzle. "Ash," she murmured, voice trembling. "I'm right here." With visible effort, Ash moved again, inch lifting his head enough to press it into Elsie's chest. Not the limp collapse of earlier. Not the fading farewell Rowan had braced for. This was deliberate. This was choice. Rowan felt something crack open inside him. Relief. Awe. A sorrowful gratitude he had no words for. He looked at Marin, and she shook her head in disbelief, eyes brightening with something dangerously close to tears. "This is not a dog at the end," she said softly. "This is a dog trying to return." Ash's breathing steadied further, each inhale deeper than the last. He shifted again, resting more of his weight against Elsie, her arms wrapped around him without hesitation, as though she'd been waiting for this moment in a way none of them understood. Jude exhaled a shaky breath. "I'll be damned," he murmured. "He's coming back." Rowan had to steady himself with a hand on the table. The swell of emotion was too much to contain neatly. Every regret he'd carried since the night before felt lighter, not gone, but no longer crushing. He knelt beside Elsie, placing a hand on Ash's back. "You're not done, old friend," he whispered. "Not yet." Aaron stepped back, watching them with quiet reverence. "We'll still need days of treatment," she said. "He's far from healed." But whatever spark he needed, she gave it to him. Elsie looked up, cheeks flushed from warmth and wonder. "I didn't do anything," she said, shaking her head. Rowan's voice softened. "Sometimes doing nothing is exactly what saves someone." Snow continued falling outside, slow and unhurried, settling over Frostwell like a second silence. But inside the clinic, the air felt different. Now lighter, warmer. Threaded with a fragile hope none of them had expected to feel again. Rowan looked at Ash, then at Elsie, then at Marin, feeling the shape of something new settling in his chest. Not a conclusion, not a triumph, but the beginning of a long, quiet return. And as Ash nuzzled deeper into Elsie's embrace, Rohan knew the story, whatever shape it took next, was far from over.